Meanwhile, well, the rest of the world keeps chugging along. The rest of the world economy keeps chugging along, but not all that well.
Right.
The World Bank said this week, yeah.
The IMF.
The IMF said not enough growth out there.
This is the time of year when the central bankers and the foreign ministers from all over the world come to Washington, and the International Monetary Fund does its update of the world economy. And if the headline was, "Deep sigh of relief, we don't seem to be on the edge of catastrophe right now." So that these days that passes for good news. The bad news is that they say the recovery is going to be bumpy. And some of those bumps are pretty big.
Already has been, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's going to continue to be bumpy. I think the big worry and the big conversation will be about Europe. Every time they seem to be getting their act together, they come right up to doing something, and then there's some political reason why they can't do it.
But in the background, you also have the Chinese saying, you know, folks, get ready. We're not going to grow at 10% a year forever, and we're slowing down starting now.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of concern, not so much that China's slowing, because that was inevitable, and particularly if China is slowing in the right way, a little less dependent on exports, a little less dependent on building factories in industries that already have overcapacity, a little more effort to get the quality of life up for their people. The thing is that China is an enormous economy that still, to some extent, has some central planning aspects to it. And I don't think anybody's very confident that they can actually control it. And it's so easy to either do too much or too little and end up with a credit explosion like we had, or the economy slows and there's political unrest. So that's why people are nervous.
None of this makes the budget debate here any easier, because one of the ways out of the budget box here would be, oh, if we had 4.5% annual growth, there'd be lots of revenues and this would all seem a lot easier. But that's not going to happen anytime soon. We're stuck with tough budget choices for a while. Right?
Yeah, and it's been interesting that we actually had a little bit of a pause in the budget debate as the Senate whirled around the gun issue, and now it'll be interesting to see if immigration overtakes the budget issue, and when we come back around, if it's well before we hit the next debt ceiling deadline or not.
Right. In a way, though, Jerry, it makes it easier for them to put it off, because the case for doing budget tightening now is weaker when the rest of the world is weaker and our exports are soft. And secondly, the side effect of this is that the yield on Treasury bonds is very low. Whenever something goes wrong in the world, people buy Treasury bonds. So even though we have this gazillion-dollar federal debt, and even though there seems to be very little prospect of any long-term budget deal, the 10-year Treasury is at 1.7%, and that does take some pressure off.
Well, in a way, though, wasn't that even implicit in what the IMF said this week? They sort of said, we got a little too much austerity, not enough growth in this world economy right now, which by words the sort of rang in Barack Obama's ears, I assume, right?
No, look, it was Barack Obama couldn't have asked for a better endorsement of his plan. They basically said to the U.S., less austerity now, a firmer plan for austerity later. And that's what Obama's been trying to say.
So next week, we'll be back at that budget question and back at the immigration question. We'll be talking about it all here on Seib Wessel on WSJ.com. Hope you can join us. In the meantime, you can join the conversation on Twitter at WSJ Live. I'm Jerry Seib.